Hello and welcome to interest.co.nz. I'm Gareth Vaughan with another of our double shot interviews, and I'm here at the University of Auckland with Vice-Chancellor Stuart McCutcheon. And look, first of all, thanks for making some time for us, Stuart. You've obviously announced in recent months the plans to buy the old Lion Brewery in Newmarket as a new site for the university. Can you just tell us a little bit around your plans for the site and why you need it?
Sure. Well, we need it for two reasons. First of all, we're growing very rapidly. So the university is expanding at a rate of about 6,000 square metres of space per year because although we're holding student numbers or undergraduate numbers, we are growing the postgraduate program and we're growing research. So that means we need more lab space, we need more office space, we need more postgraduate teaching space. The other issue is that many of the challenges that New Zealand universities face in terms of contributing to the country's development require multidisciplinary kinds of approaches. So if you think about climate change, if you think about food security and safety, if you think about diabetes in some of our populations, they typically require researchers from multiple disciplines, which means you want the university close together. Our problem is that the Tamaki and Epsom campuses are some distance from the City and Grafton campuses, and so the Newmarket acquisition offers us an opportunity to bring the whole university together into essentially one rather large campus, but still a single unit as opposed to operating the university over multiple locations that are spread out all over Auckland.
Now, obviously, this type of expansion doesn't come cheap. You've mentioned that it's a commercially sensitive figure in terms of what you're paying for the Newmarket site, so I won't bother asking you what it is, but I imagine it's certainly tens of millions of dollars. How are you funding the expansion?
Well, the universities in this country, and the University of Auckland is no exception, fund almost all of their capital development themselves, so we don't get government support for buildings or campuses. And so, put it simply, we cash flow our own depreciation. So our annual income is about $930 million a year. Of that, we spend $800 million running the place, primarily on staff and general running costs of the university. $100 million roughly is our cash flow cost of depreciation, and $30 million is the operating surplus. And so we fund our capital acquisitions and our capital development from the combination of the cash flow related depreciation and the surplus, about $130 million a year, and then we have approval to borrow up to $300 million because we have two very large projects totaling over $500 million coming up over the next 3 to 5 years, and so we have a need to borrow in the short term to fund those projects between now and sort of a decade hence.
What are those projects that you're looking to do?
Well, there's the acquisition of Newmarket, obviously, although in time we expect to set that off through the sale of the Tamaki campus. The two big projects are a major refurbishment and new build for engineering, which will be in the order of $250,000. Some of that's happening at Newmarket, but the bulk of it on the city campus. And then a very large science rebuild on the corner of Wellesley and Simon Streets, which again will be in excess of $200 million. And that allows us to bring a lot of our science departments together into one precinct because, again, they're spread out all over the campus at the moment.
So you said that you could borrow up to $300 million. Where will you borrow that from, or who will you borrow that from?
Through the banks. So we have to get government permission to borrow because governments are concerned about risk for public institutions, although we're not government owned. If the university got into serious financial trouble, the government would have a political problem. So they have an interest in making sure that we are financially sound. But we will borrow from the banks. We're a good bet. I mean, we've got a significant base of unencumbered assets, and we'll simply borrow at commercial rates through the banks, and then we'll pay that loan off through the cash flow as I've described it. But the borrowing gets us through the next 3 to 5 years when we have the largest capital construction program that we've had in the university's history.
So have you got that government permission for the borrowing? You have.
Yes, and we've had that for a couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you actually done any of the borrowing yet?
We have just started to borrow. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that will ramp up. The peak is in about 4 years when these two projects are kind of consuming resource at a major rate.
And can you name the banks that you're borrowing through, or is it?
No. Well, I prefer not to. I mean, they're commercial banks. We have commercial arrangements with them.
Okay. And you talked about the revenue too was over 900 million a year. Can you just tell us what the revenue sources are for the university and whether you're looking to perhaps find new ones or have got any new ones in the pipeline?
Well, the major revenue sources, so there's the government subsidises domestic students, and then we charge domestic students a tuition fee as well. That combined is our largest revenue source. That's about half of our revenue, but it's a revenue source that's very tightly constrained because government increases its subsidy by only a very small amount each year, and it constrains our ability to set realistic student fees. So we can't put student fees up by more than about 4% a year. Then we have a significant revenue stream from international students. That's growing.
How many international students do you have?
About 5,000 international students.
And it's about 40,000 in total, isn't it?
About 40,000 students headcount, yeah. And we don't have any government constraints in the setting of international student fees, so we set those fees to meet what the market will bear for a quality product. And then we have a significant research operation worth about $200 million a year. Some of that is competitive research funding from government agencies, Health Research Council, Marsden, MB. And a significant part of it is commercial research relationships through our research company, Auckland Uni Services Limited. And then there's another 70 or 80 million comes from the provision of various services. So we provide accommodation services to students, which they pay for separately from their tuition fees and so on. Okay.
And in terms of the growth plans, you're growing at 6,000 square metres a year.
Yeah.
I mean, it sort of struck me. It's a lot. It struck me reading this that we've had a lot of debate and discussion in recent months about the Auckland Unitary Plan, about how the city is growing and going to grow, and the university is very much mirroring what's going on around it. So, I mean, obviously you're going to have the Newmarket site, but you've got these other new buildings coming as well. So it's going to be a state for several years of quite a lot of building work going on.
And it has been already. I mean, the big building projects started in the early 2000s with the Owen Glen building when John Hood was Vice-Chancellor. We've just finished a refurbishment of our medical faculty at Grafton, which was a $250 million refurb there. We've got the science and engineering buildings that'll be $500 million between them. But we've also got a lot of other things that have been going on. We're spending several million a year on upgrading lecture theatres. We've refurbished some of our arts buildings, new engineering library. So there's a lot of that work going on, because I think if you look at the universities, this university and New Zealand universities historically, the funding pressures they've been under have meant there's been rather a lot of deferred repairs and maintenance. We're at a point now where if we don't have quality facilities, we simply won't retain the best students and we won't retain the best staff. The leading Australian universities are recruiting in New Zealand. They're in Auckland, I think, this week recruiting for students. They're constantly looking to recruit our best staff. So we have to have a quality research and teaching environment if we want to keep top quality people here. That means we have to be prepared to invest in that environment.
But this is the first time the university's borrowed money.
It is, and historically the university funded its capital development out of its own cash flow. We feel a need to get some serious development done in the sciences particularly, which is a very expensive area for development of buildings. Laboratories are hugely expensive, and so being willing to borrow is just a way of accelerating that process. We expect in turn, of course, that the better quality of buildings will attract better students, will attract high quality staff. They in turn will write more research grants. So there's a virtuous circle, if you get it right, of improving the quality of the campus, bringing in new revenue streams and new opportunities, and then that creates a further demand for campus renewal and helps you to fund it.
Now, you do also look to constrain or restrain your student numbers.
Yes.
How do you do that?
Well, I suppose it's important to explain the reasons for it. So we've always constrained the numbers in the most expensive courses. The medical program, for example, has always had a fixed intake by agreement with government, although this government has been increasing that intake in recent years to deal with the shortage of doctors problem. We moved in 2009 to restrict entry to all of our programs, and it was because we felt that the university at 40,000 students, or about 32,000 full-time equivalent students, was already very big by international standards. We wanted to focus on making the university a better place rather than making it a bigger place. And so we got agreement from our council in 2009 to limit entry. The way we do it is that we set what's called a guaranteed minimum entry score for every academic program, and that score is a function of what a student has achieved in secondary school. I mean, it can be in Cambridge or NCA or International Baccalaureate. We do a translation into the guaranteed minimum score. If you meet that score, then you get into the university, into that program. And then we have a buffer or a band for students from some of our target equity groups, particularly Māori and Pacific students, who tend to be in lower decile schools, tend not to get the same level of achievement in secondary school. They are admitted with university entrance, which is a lower standard than our guaranteed entry score, but they then often will have to undertake particular programs or maybe limit the number of papers they get, so that we support them through that early transition. And we find that once they get through the first couple of years of the university, their performance is then indistinguishable from that of other students. And what's happened when we went to clear targets, of course, is the schools and the students have responded. So they've said, well, if I need to get that score to get into the University of Auckland's engineering program, then I'm going to work harder at school, and the school's going to support me to do that, and mum and dad are going to stand over me while I do it. And so we've seen our students, all students, responding to those scores and improving their performance, which means then they're better prepared to come to university, which means it's a better experience for them and for their teachers.
Now, you're obviously going to be looking to sell your Tamaki and Epsom campuses as well. How soon do you think that's likely to happen? And also, when will Newmarket be up and running? Well,
Newmarket, we're in demolition at the moment, so a lot of the existing facilities are coming down. We will begin construction of a new civils engineering research laboratory in the next couple of months. We'll begin refurbishment of some of the existing large buildings to create an integrated engineering research facility at about the same time. Both of those projects will be finished by the end of 2014. That will allow us to bring engineering research from Tamaki into Newmarket and some from the city. Moving stuff out of the city buildings will then allow us to refurbish those buildings. So Newmarket will be up and running quite quickly, but our only immediate plans are for those two facilities, because Newmarket is partly an opportunity for long-term expansion. So we don't want to fill it up immediately, because that's how we will grow the university over the next 30-odd years. Tamaki is being essentially prepared for sale now, so our property services team are receiving expressions of interest. They're also doing the necessary information memoranda and the due diligence stuff that's required to sell the Tamaki campus, and I'd expect that process will get underway more or less immediately. When will it sell? Well, that depends, of course, on when there's somebody who wants to buy it at the right price. And I think it will probably be sold in pieces over time rather than as a whole unit. Epsom's a different question, because we can't vacate Epsom until we build a new Faculty of Education facility on the city campus here. We can't do that until we've finished the big projects that are in front of us. So that's scheduled for somewhere around 2018, 19, 20. Once we build that new education facility, then we'd be in a position to sell Epsom. So we're talking about, I think, a decade away as far as Epsom's concerned.
In terms of all these plans in the pipeline, I mean, are they going to take care of your growth for the next 20 or 30 years? I mean, I'm just wondering, where might the university look to next?
Well, I've sort of figured that after 30 years it's not my problem anymore, but no, they will. I mean, the great thing about Newmarket is it's zoned for relatively high density, so you can get a lot of teaching and research activities at Newmarket. We have some development sites still on the city campus and on Grafton. So when we take the three sites together, and of course they're integrated because they're close together, they have good public transport, that gives us probably 30 to 40 years of expansion at our current rate. And we don't know whether that will continue. I mean, it's a high rate of expansion at the moment. It may slow as we get major projects completed. But certainly it secures the university in the central city for the next 30 or 40 years. Beyond that, who knows? I mean, technology may change the way in which the university operates. There may come a point in time where we have to look for other development sites close to the university's central campuses. But I think the advantage of being in an integrated campus is what really matters, and Newmarket really gives us that opportunity, whereas Epsom and Tamaki are some distance away, quite hard to get staff and students to, particularly when you've got an hourly timetable. So from that point of view, Newmarket offers us a huge advantage.
Well, thanks for that. That's
Pleasure.
Stuart McCutcheon, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Auckland, and I'm Gareth Vaughan at interest.co.nz.